All right, I just got to get this joke out of my system. I can neither confirm nor deny this joke is indicative of my feelings about this book. Okay? Real quick. 3, 2, 1. Lore of the Wilds, more like Bore the Wilds. More like Snore the Wilds. You feel me? All right, that's done with. Hey, what up? Welcome or welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with a Regular Dude. My name is D, and today we're going to be talking about Lore of the Wilds by Analeigh Sbrana. But before we get into all of that, I got to give a shout out to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretters, my top tier supporters on Patreon, Laughing Cat Dog and Luba Brock. Thank you so much for supporting my content and helping to ensure that I'm able to put it out as frequently as possible. If you also want to help support this channel and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else and gain access to my private Discord server, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. All right, let's talk about Lore of the Wilds. This is a young adult romantasy published by Harper Voyager. I didn't know much about this book before I read it. Like, I'd seen it in a few TikTok posts and on a few TBR lists or whatever, but I didn't know anything about it. But I decided to read it when I was on a call with a friend, and I think I mentioned this book or something like that, and then she was like, oh, please read that and review it because I would love to hear your thoughts. And I'm a people pleaser. I mean, not really, because nobody's pleased with me. Yeah, this friend wanted to hear my thoughts, so this is me sharing my thoughts. Hope you're watching, friend. But first, I'm going to read this premise. A stunning romantasy about an enchanted library, 2 handsome fae, and 1 human who can bring them all together. A library with a deadly enchantment, a fae lord who wants in, a human woman willing to risk it all for a taste of power. In a land ruled by ruthless fae, 21-year-old Lore LMAU's village is trapped in a forested prison. Lore knows that any escape attempt is futile. Her scars are a testament to her past failures. But when her village is threatened, Lore makes a desperate deal with the Fae Lord. She will leave her home to catalog and organize an enchanted library that hasn't been touched in 1,000 years. No Fae may enter the library, but there is a chance a human might be able to breach the cursed doors. She convinces him that she's willing to risk her life for wealth, but really she's after the one thing that Fae covet above all: magic of her own. As Lore navigates the hostile world outside, she's forced to rely on 2 fae males to survive. 2 very different, very dangerous, very attractive fae males. When undeniable chemistry ignites, she's not just in danger of losing her life, but her heart to the very creatures she can never trust. I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. I almost don't want to review this book. When I've mentioned this book in conversation, like as I was reading it, like my patrons on my Discord server, other bookish content creators, like they all kind of told me that they'd heard mostly not good things about it, or that they didn't have good things to say about it. And I'm struggling because I don't necessarily want to add like another negative review onto the funeral pyre of this book. You know what I'm saying? So while I don't like this book, I did not enjoy reading this book like at all. I do think that it's good that it exists. You feel me? I personally think it's as good, if not slightly better than books like Fourth Wing, A Court of Thorns and Roses, Assistant to the Villain. Lightlark is way better than Lightlark. And I know some of you will be like,
but D, you don't like any of those books. You don't think those books are good.
I know. I said what I said. What I'm saying is that I think that this book should be, or I'm surprised that this book isn't as beloved as those other books that I listed. I've noticed that any romantasy that's written by women of color seem to be like critiqued more harshly than their white counterparts. And by putting out my reviews of the same books, but I review all of my books kind of with the same level of criticism or scrutiny or whatever, like I feel like I'm emboldening some people and kind of validating their white bias just because I also didn't love some of these books for different reasons. And before I say this next thing, I just want all of you to remember, I am not calling anyone out. I am not judging anybody. I am not accusing anybody of anything. I suspect that part of why these romantasy books that are written by women of color are critiqued more harshly or scrutinized more or whatever is because of unchecked white bias from the reviewers, regardless of whether or not they themselves are white. White bias is a thing. Like when these romance fantasies or YA fantasies written by women of color, black women, Asian women, whatever, if they're not amazing, like if they're just okay or pretty good, they're kind of regarded like they're bad, or they're not reviewed as highly, and they don't get the same sales numbers as like books written by white women that are not great in my personal opinion, but they fly off the shelves like hotcakes. Yo, what is a hotcake? Is that a cinnamon bun or is that something else? I don't know. I've never seen one before. It reminds me of like when I said Black Panther was just okay. A lot of people took that as me giving them the N-word pass, which is something I would never do. I can't do. You can't give out that pass. Don't say it. And I have no control how somebody like takes my content or interprets my content or anything like that. Like I can say, whatever opinion, and someone will hear the opposite of what I meant to say. So what I'm saying is that I'm kind of like hesitant or nervous about reviewing this book very specifically because I didn't enjoy it. And I'm worried that that's going to in some way tell people that I'm saying that like Black people don't have a space or don't deserve a space in romance fantasy, which I absolutely do not think is true. I think that there should be more Black written romance fantasy. And I think I want to talk about this probably in a separate video, but I really do think that Black written sci-fi and fantasy is held to a higher standard than white written fantasy. And it bothers me that I guess, even like I said, I don't have control over what like how people take my videos or my reviews or things that I say. I don't really want to be giving fuel for a racist fire. You know what I'm saying? And again, I'm not saying that you're racist if you didn't like this book or if you didn't like To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods or whatever. If I said that, that would be a stupid thing to say, and y'all silly if you think that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I think when we consume things, it's important to maybe like check in with yourself and double check as to why you might not like something. Basically, like check your biases. Like as a man, I try to be anti-misogyny. I try to be respectful to women and non-men. And I try my best to make my channel and my Discord and all that place a safe space for women and non-men. And also, I am not immune to being a patriarchal asshole. So sometimes when I'm reading a book and I'm not vibing with it, I don't like it, I got to check with myself, like, is this bad or is it just so not for me that I don't like it? Like, I got to be like, maybe I'm too toxic or maybe I'm just too much of a guy to really enjoy this genre because it's not catered to my gender. That's a long rant. I guess all I'm saying is that like I'm gonna review this and I'm gonna give my unfiltered like opinions and all that, but also I guess I think that this book is worth a read, or at least worth given a fair chance. I don't always think that. Like there's a few times where I'm like, you really don't need to read this book, it's a waste of your time. I think that this book is worth a read, and it's worth reading with like an open mind. All right, let's do the spoiler-free section of this review. Let's talk about the characters. The only character that's like characterized in this book is the main character, Lore. And even then, I don't really think that we get much from this character. Like, I don't know much about this character's motivations. Meaning, like, there were times reading this book where I could not tell you whether or not this character's choices or actions are in line with the character. Like I would just have to take the author's word for it because, it's like, yeah, I guess it's in line with this character because that's what she's doing. Whereas like if Aang from Avatar The Last Airbender just sucker punched Sokka, like I could tell you that that's not in line with his character. I know Lore's backstory, like that was explained in the book, and some of what she does or how she is makes sense. I didn't find this character particularly likable or compelling, and I didn't really care about, anything that was happening around her. She loves books, she's thirsty, and she makes reckless, impulsive decisions that put herself and everyone around her in danger. Pretty typical Romantasy MC if you ask me. One thing that I think is truly unique about this book is the two love interests. Well, they're both Black, which I think is hype. But also they are equal parts grumpy golden boy and edgy shadow boo, and neither of them has shadow magic, so that's pretty cool. But like neither of them are truly characters at all. They're almost not worth talking about because their characterization is thinner than the paper the book is printed on. And that was a pretty good one. I'm proud of that. Okay, let's talk about world building. Thank God this book came with a map because I wouldn't have understand how like the geography of this world worked just off of the writing alone. I think that there's some interesting lore to this world. Zing. I'm on fire today, baby. Let's go. And the magic system, there is like no system established here. I'm sure that that'll probably get fleshed out more in like the second book of this series, but there just wasn't really a lot of, it was a lot of hand wavy. I think part of that is that magic's mysterious. I don't know. It's a nothing system. Let's talk about plot or conflict. It's pretty standard. I think there's a weird part of the book where like half of the party goes off on an adventure that we never see, and Laura stays back at a hideout and like cooks. But like in this specific genre, regardless of what age demographic the book is intended for, it follows a formula that's pretty standard. And then let's talk about craft, the writing. It's a little repetitive. I think there's a lot of adverbs. Somebody lets out a breath they didn't know they was holding. It's a little clunky. I think this book could have benefited from maybe another round of editing just to like refine it a little bit, smooth it out. Whenever we get to this part, I'm always like, I don't really even know if I need to talk about the writing in a line by line sense with any like detail because I'm not smart. So I'm like, what the fuck do I know, Like my fucking mom is an editor and teaches editing classes and teaches some other like writing classes and stuff like that. But I teach poetry writing. I'm teaching more about like introduction to being a spoken word artist. And I do a lot more like, hey, let's like find creative angles or twists on cliches and stuff like that. But like with like grammar and shit. But like my grammar when it comes to prose and shit, it's ass. Like I would need an editor so bad if I were to like try to publish something long form. All right, so now we're moving on to the spoiler section of this review. So this is almost like kind of like if I'm reacting to the book or whatever. I don't know, I kind of rant sometimes, go off on tangents, but basically like I took notes while I was reading this book. And so I just read through the notes and then kind of give commentary on my notes. And I know that most of you are not looking at this video. You're just like playing it while you're doing the dishes or getting the casserole into the oven. But if you see me looking down, that's because I'm reading it off of my laptop instead of my phone. And my laptop is directly underneath my camera. And maybe you didn't need to know that little behind the scenes trivia, but now you do. You're welcome. So right off the bat, the dedication was for those who seek magic within the pages of a book. And when I first read that, I was like, the fuck? Like, it's one of those things that's like, it's really poetic and it feels deep for a second because a lot of people who are avid readers do find magic in between the pages of a book. They get lost in the worlds in between the words or whatever, and it's cool. But at the time, I was like, it's like, sometimes I think things can either be deep or stupid depending on your mood. And I think when I first read it, I was like, that's dumb. But I also got what she meant. And given like later on in the book, kind of makes more sense. I'm like, oh, that's actually, you know what? Credit is where credit's due. It's kind of cute. I don't usually talk about dedications. I'm usually like, whatever. But I thought I would mention that. So chapter 1, the gods punish humans allegedly and drag them from the world into this one. It sucks. Laura's mama told a more hopeful story and she's talking to her friend and the conversation is like super awkward. So the friend's name is Gray and that's like a childhood friend and I thought was going to be one of the love interests, like Laura would have to choose between a fae and a human, and maybe that'll happen like during the series, I don't know, but that's not happening in this book. But yeah, the conversation between the two while they're talking about trying to escape the woods and, get out there in the real world and maybe find magic so they can defend themselves and build up the village. It was all really sort of like, people don't talk like this. Like sometimes when we're talking about fantasy, the book is really like it's got more of a medieval vibe. And so I'm like, yeah, no one talks like this because you're not supposed to, but it still has like a conversational flow. And I just don't feel like this initial conversation had a lot of flow to it. In chapter 2, two Fae come to the apothecary that Lore works at, and Lore cons them into buying a book for a lot of money. She mentions that she helped translate the books with her aunt. And then my note here is very basic fantasy MC to love books, and then the Fae leave. Obviously, they're going to come back and make her do something evil. And then I guess I took this quote, a ballad spun from stardust. And then my note is ballads aren't spun. And that's like another one of those, like, it's pretty. It kind of sounds like it would be in poetry, but like it doesn't make a ton of sense. And I think when we're talking about poems don't always have to make sense. But I think when you're trying to be poetic, but you are writing prose, I appreciate it when the poetry does make sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there's some writers who are very atmospheric and their poetic lines don't make sense. And if it were poetry, I'd be like, yeah, it's fine. But because I'm like, I need this to make sense because it's a story, and it's not just what the meaning is what you make of it, like a lot of poetry is, then I'm like, I don't like it as much. In chapters 3 to 6, there was an earthshake, and the apothecary, orphanage, winery was destroyed. Two Fae soldiers come and say that they've been ordered to bring the owner of the apothecary back to the Fae kingdom. Lord, supposed to be Lore, lies and says that it's her. They go to the kingdom, and the Fae tell her that they need her to go into the library because they can't, because the doors have been warded, and catalog everything. And she's like, maybe I can learn about magic and its secret origins and whatnot. After her first day, she's eating dinner in the servants' hall, and she sees a hot guard. She accidentally startled a Fae youngling, and a bunch of Fae start complaining she's there. She goes looking for the maid who is supposed to show her around, and she gets lost. The hot guard stops her from going up into the dungeons and offers to take her to her quarters. Yeah, I got like nothing to say here. I was just kind of like, oh, of course, like the hot guard finds her, and of course he was looking at her or whatever. And it's very edgy Shadow Boo introduction trope. You know what I mean? Like, I guess that can't really be a trope because it doesn't have a catchy name, but it is like, that's the part, it's like, but it is part of that formula where like he's got to stare at her, she's got to be afraid, and then he's going to be nice to her, but in like the most begrudging way possible. In chapters 7 to 8, Asher, the hot guard, is nicer and helps her shop. The steward, who's like the one who's like, you got to do this job for me, whatever, reveals that they want Lore to find a specific text on magic or studying the stars. Asher and Lore go to an autumn equinox festival together, even though Lore's not supposed to be there. Again, I don't really care about anything that's going on here. The one thing that I think I should say about the writing, actually, now that it comes to mind, because I didn't think of it when I was writing the notes, but this author is pretty good at food writing and like pretty good at being like, isn't this pleasant? This is cozy. And I think like would probably write a really stunning, cozy fantasy story. On the other hand, Lore, the character, has to stifle a lot of moans when she eats. And I thought that was a weird quirk, because I don't know nobody that moans when they eat. And maybe that's supposed to be like, well, she's been in poverty and hasn't had good food or whatever. But I still just don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who exclaims like when they eat. I do know a couple people who like do a little dance when they eat. Like they'll eat something and be like, Shout out Chelsea. I know you don't watch these. Chapters 9 to 12, Lore finds a magic book that casts illusions. Asher is deployed south, and she's on her own for a bit. The Lord who hired her summons her for lunch. And the magic book found, and they just kind of like have a conversation. The magic book that Lore found, this is so annoying. So when I was taking my notes, I didn't really, like, I never really check what I'm writing. I just kind of like type it, and it keeps auto-correcting Lore to Lord, and I also referred to the Fae Lord who's paying her and having her look through the library as just the Lord because I didn't care what his name was. It's confusing me. The magic book that Lore found talks to her and offers her a deal. It shows her that her home has been destroyed and she decides to run away with the magic book. Asher catches her and the other guards catch them together. And Lore agrees to the book's deal and she kills 2 guards and they go on the run and they go to Asher's hometown or something. Again, like nothing super interesting about this scene. Although I will say, like, magic book and the book, it kind of talks to you like a Venom symbiote or whatever. I was like, all right, this is different for sure. Chapters 13 to 16, they go to an inn and they kiss and they sell Asher's swords for impressive disguises and travel with a merchant family. And the children mention Fey children going missing. And they stop at a camp and are attacked by bandits. Asher kills 2 of the 3 and questions the third. Third mentions that they are sent to kill Lore and retrieve her grimoire. And then they go to Asher's family friends inn to hide out. So yeah, there's a smooch. So yeah, there's some pretty intense smooching. And this was kind of the part where I was like, oh, is that kind of romantasy? I had to scroll up and read the premise again. But there's a bit about the undeniable chemistry igniting, and I think that that's really funny because the chemistry doesn't just ignite, it just kind of explodes. And I think I prefer slow burns or like a little bit of building in romances that I read. Like I read a fair amount of romance now for the channel because a lot of y'all are sick or whatever. Fuck y'all. I'm just kidding. I love you. Not really. I like some of you for sure. I got so sidetracked there. But yeah, like they're posing as husband and wife for this section of the book. They've kissed. There's like whoa, like this is the only person that I want. And I love you and all this shit. And I'm like, this feels like out of left field. And to be honest, like it makes more sense why at the end. But to say that there's undeniable chemistry, it's like, yeah, there's a chemical explosion, but it doesn't build. And I don't think I love a slow burn, but maybe I prefer a slow burn to whatever this is because it just kind of, it's just like, oh, we doing this now. Like I would have expected this a little later in the book, even though I guess it's halfway, but it wasn't built in that first half. So I'm like, all right, I guess, enjoy or whatever. But yeah, I didn't buy it. Chapters 17 to 21, Lore goes to market with Isla, a light fae who is friends with Asher, and they get spotted by royal guards, and she runs into the woods, and Isla's grumpy twin brother, Findrel, shows up and kills the guards. Lore is injured, and Asher and Isla lead the guards away in disguise while Lore hides at the inn and starts cooking to pass the time, and she secretly studies the grimoire at night to learn magic. So Findrel's the other love interest. I guess I never named them, but Findrel's the other love interest, and he's far grumpier and he's very aloof. But like we know nothing about this guy. Like, why was he there in the woods? And like it was never explained. It was never explained why he just randomly showed up in the woods, even though the book like poses the question, why was he there? And everything he does, you just kind of have to accept that that's because it's what the book wants him to do, because we know nothing about him or why he does what he does. Chapters 22 to 27. Through practicing the magic book, Lore learns to see people with a scrying bowl and discovers the Light Fae Queen has collected her friend Gray. He's been drugged with enchanted food and Lore goes to rescue him. This is anticlimactic. If the queen doesn't come back, what the fuck? That's a note. Whoops. But yeah, no, like she just goes and saves him, and like we spend no time with the queen or whatever, and they don't get caught or anything, and it felt just very like, oh, and now we're here because I guess we just needed a reason to get Gray to the same location as everybody else. Gray recovers and tells Lore their village has been destroyed and the humans have been rounded up. Asher returns and the team make a plan to save the humans from the capital that they fled from. While Asher's been away, Lore has been developing feels for Findrel. Findrel is acting like the Katy Perry song, like hot when you're cold, and yes when you're not. You're in your I don't remember the words, but yeah, Findrel doesn't make sense to me. Like he's like it's obvious that the author wants us to know that he likes lore, but there's like kind of no reason for it. Like I guess he saved her life because he thinks she's hot, whatever. I don't know. It's just weird. In chapters 28 to 33, they go and save the human children, and it's revealed like I didn't write this down when I was reading it because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna talk about it, but um basically the Fae rounded up the humans because the Fae are like not producing children and they're running out of children, and there's a war coming, and so the steward wants to collect the humans and use them basically as breeding stock so they can bolster their military numbers with halflings, and then they'll like I don't know filter out the bloodlines later. And so that was his big villain monologue, and then he and Lore fight because he's really old, so even though he's a Fae, Lore has like a chance against him, and then she uses basically like magic acid, throws it on his face, and he dies. And then Findril and her are escaping, and they think that Gray and the humans and Asher have all made this escape. And then Asher comes back, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And it's revealed that Asher isn't real, and he's actually the Fey Lord in disguise because he can like transform and stuff. And that's a new twist, I guess, was like something that I wrote, and it's like that does kind of veer off of the typical formula a little bit, and then the book kind of ends there. And so that twist isn't like a crazy twist. Like I'm not like, whoa, that was crazy, but it is a crazy twist because that kind of makes like a big plot point. Like at the end, like basically, like this is something that I got hung up on. But basically, there's like SA in this book, and that's not. I haven't heard a thing about it. You know what I'm saying? Because like before the team goes on the mission to save the humans, Asher and Lore bang, but he's somebody else in disguise. Asher was never real. It's just a fake identity because the Lore, because the Fey Lord, whatever his name is, like Citadel or Cindriel or something, he just gets tired of being a rich guy sometimes. So then he's like, yeah, I'm gonna just pretend to be a low Fey instead of the man in charge. And yeah, I don't know, like that just made me feel kind of gross. Like, yo, you're pretending to be somebody else, and then you like hook up with this person, and like I think that like because you can't give consent fully informed. You can't give like fully informed consent when you're not fully informed on who you're getting down with is, right? So I think that that's kind of a weird, fucked up detail of the book that I haven't heard about. I think it's weird that I haven't heard about that. It's weird. It's gross to me. And like some people might say that I'm taking it too seriously, and some people might take that to like a really crazy place. And then the book does just end there. It's like it hits you with a to be continued. And I really don't like cliffhanger endings like that. That's just something like I've made that very clear. Like on this channel, I've said it a lot where I just don't like cliffhanger endings. I have no problem with like completing a story arc and then setting up the next thing, but to just kind of be like, yep, and we're out, especially since the book's kind of short. I'm really struggling with rating this book, but I think I'm gonna give it like 2.8 stars. Like it's not quite a 3. I'm glad that it exists because I just think that there should be more diverse representation in like romantasy, especially this Fae bullshit. My biggest critique is that it kind of follows the formula like a Marvel movie does. There's cool ideas in there, but no ground is being broken. But then again, maybe it's not trying to break ground. You know what I'm saying? Maybe the author just wanted Akatar, but there's a black protagonist instead. And I think that's pretty hype. Another thing that I didn't note, there was a lot of detail about like taking care of hair. So that was cool. But yeah, I just don't love this book. I don't think that it's any worse than like Fourth Wing or Akatar or Assistant to the Villain or whatever. And I genuinely think if you liked any of those books that you would like this book. And I do think that maybe it's getting a little more hate because it's not written by a white woman. But I think that's it for me. So thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to the page, and hit that notification bell. That way you never miss a video. That all helps out the channel a ton. I know every YouTuber says it, but that's because it's true. If you want to support the channel even more and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. There you'll get an extra rant review video from me once per month, as well as access to my private Discord server where you can chat with me and a bunch of really lovely people. The club is kind of growing lately, and it's been really sweet talking to everybody about books, movies, anime, whatever. Special shout out to my super duper don't fretters, Keisha, Cassie, Knightsmith, and Oliver. I really appreciate y'all helping me to create this content and ensuring that I'm able to put it out as frequently as possible. Thank you again so much for watching this video. Y'all have a good one. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.